On a dark, rainy night, the small town of St. Jude's was enveloped in silence. In the heart of the city stood an ancient and majestic church, the Church of São Miguel, known for its Gothic architecture and for harboring dark secrets. Few dared enter it after dark, as there were rumors that the church was cursed. A group of 4 friends, Sarah, Mark, Emily, and Daniel, were determined to solve the mystery surrounding the church. They were skeptical of haunting stories and believed the truth was there to be discovered. Armed with flashlights and courage, they gathered outside the church that rainy night. The church door creaked as they slowly pushed it inside. The interior was dark and eerie, with flashlight light revealing broken stained glass windows and dusty benches. The altar candles were lit, casting a dim light on the figure of a stone angel, but the rest of the church was plunged into darkness. As they explored the church, the friends began to feel a strange presence around them. Soft footsteps echoed through the empty hallways, and they could have sworn they heard unsettling murmurs. However, they refused to let fear overcome them, convinced that there was a logical explanation for the strange events. As Sarah, Mark, Emily, and Daniel continued to explore the dark halls of the church, the atmosphere seemed to grow increasingly heavy and unsettling. Their flashlights illuminated the broken stained glass windows and dusty benches, creating dancing shadows on the walls. Sarah, the most skeptical of the group, began to feel a strange presence around her. At every corner they turned, she caught fleeting glimpses of dark shadows that seemed to move quickly. She tried to convince herself that they were just tricks of the light, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Mark, normally the most fearless, began to question his decision to enter that church at night. He noticed that the candles on the altar seemed to move on their own, as if they were being blown by an invisible breeze. His rational mind tried to find logical explanations, but the feeling of restlessness was growing inside him. Emily and Daniel also felt that something was wrong. As they searched the hallways, they heard unsettling whispers that seemed to come from the shadows. They exchanged worried looks, but neither of them wanted to admit that they were scared. They decided to check the sacristy, where liturgical objects were kept. As they opened the sacristy door, a gust of cold air hit them, sending shivers down their spines. The sacristy was dark except for a single candle burning on the altar. The candlelight cast distorted shadows across the room, creating an even more frightening atmosphere. Emily and Daniel felt as if they were being watched by invisible eyes as they examined the dusty, ancient religious objects. It was then that they heard a strange sound coming from a dark corner of the sacristy. It was like an unsettling whisper, a whispering voice that didn't seem to belong to either of them. They exchanged alarmed glances and followed the sound to a small cabinet built into the wall. When they opened the closet, they found an old church record book, full of notes dating back centuries. The notes spoke of dark rituals and a secret society that met in the church at night. The friends were perplexed and worried about what they had discovered. They decided it was time to leave the sacristy and continue exploring the church. As they left, the candle on the sacristy altar suddenly went out, leaving them in the dark. Their flashlights also began to fail, casting distorted shadows on the walls. The darkness around him seemed to come to life, shadows writhing and dancing like living beings. At that moment, a whispering voice echoed through the church, a voice that seemed to come from the walls themselves. "You shouldn't be here," the voice whispered, sending chills down the friends' spines. "This is our home now, and you are the intruders." Emily, Mark, Sarah, and Daniel felt their hearts speed up, fear taking over them. They could no longer deny that something supernatural was happening in that church. The sinister voice continued to whisper, and the shadows closed around him, making escape impossible. They were trapped in a church that seemed to have taken on a life of its own, and the nightmare was just beginning. As the ominous voice whispered through the church, and shadows danced around them, Emily, Mark, Sarah, and Daniel were trapped in an escalating nightmare. The feeling that something evil was lurking became oppressive, but they knew they couldn't give up. They needed to understand what was happening in that dark church. Determined to unravel the mystery, the friends decided to split up and investigate the dark corners of the church. They each took a different path, their flashlights shaking in their shaking hands. Sarah entered a narrow, shadowy hallway, where broken stained glass cast grotesque shadows on the walls. As she explored, she felt a sudden change in temperature, as if she were passing through a draft of icy air. Her breath condensed before her eyes, and she felt as if she was no longer alone. Then she heard laughter, low, chilling laughter that echoed in the empty hallway. She swung her flashlight around, but saw no one. The sound of laughter seemed to move, as if an invisible presence was approaching her. Sarah felt fear rising within her, but she forced herself to continue. Meanwhile, Mark explored the main nave of the church. The dusty benches appeared to be moving on their own, creating the illusion that someone was sitting on them. He tried to ignore appearances and focus on the investigation, but the feeling that he was being watched tormented him. Suddenly, a dark shadow quickly moved down the side corridor. Mark swung his flashlight in the direction of the movement, but all he saw was the shadow dissipating. He felt trapped, as if something was hunting him in that dark church. Emily and Daniel, in turn, entered the sacristy, where they had found the old record book. The room was even darker than before, and they felt a strange presence around them. Daniel touched an antique wooden table, and the lid of a secret compartment opened, revealing a set of black candles. As they watched the candles, they lit themselves, casting a flickering light over the sacristy. Emily and Daniel looked at each other, perplexed. They felt that the room was transforming as the dark energy intensified. It was then that a whispering voice filled the room, echoing off the walls. "You shouldn't have come here," whispered the voice, as if the candles themselves were speaking. "This is our home now, and you are the intruders." Emily and Daniel felt fear grip them as the ominous voice continued to speak, revealing that the church was linked to a dark past of occult rituals and buried secrets. They realized they were in a situation they could not control, and the mystery of the church was unfolding before them in terrifying ways. As the friends faced inexplicable events in different parts of the church, they began to realize that they were linked by something more sinister than they could have imagined. The whispering voice, the moving shadows, and the fleeting appearances indicated that something supernatural was happening, something that would test them in unimaginable ways. They knew they needed to find a way to confront the mystery and hopefully find a way out of this growing nightmare. As the mystery in the church continued to unfold, the friends gathered in the main nave, sharing their terrifying experiences. The whispering voices, moving shadows, and unexplained apparitions had turned the church into a nightmarish place, and they realized they were facing something beyond human comprehension. They decided they needed to find answers and a way to escape this supernatural nightmare. Together, they began revisiting the old record book they found in the sacristy, looking for clues about what was happening in the church. The book contained records of secret rituals and meetings held by an occult society that had existed in the city for centuries. Members of the society had worshipped dark entities and performed macabre rituals in the church. One of the entries mentioned a summoning ritual performed in the church's crypt, where human offerings were made in exchange for supernatural power. Upon reading this, Emily, Mark, Sarah, and Daniel felt chills run down their spines. It seemed as if the church was permeated with the evil energy resulting from these ancient rituals. They realized that in order to escape, they would have to face this dark energy. They decided to return to the crypt, the place where it all began. As they descended the dark and damp stairs, they felt the atmosphere become even more dense and oppressive. The walls seemed to close in on them, as if the crypt itself was trying to stop them from advancing. Arriving at the crypt, Emily and Daniel relived the vision of the spirit of the ancient priest they had previously encountered. The hooded figure materialized before them, empty eyes fixed in their direction. But this time, there were no threatening whispers. Instead, the spirit looked at them with an expression of sadness and despair. "You must undo the evil that was done here," said the spirit in a plaintive voice. "The souls that were sacrificed are still trapped in this church, and the darkness grows every day." Emily, Mark, Sarah, and Daniel understood that the only way to escape them. The church was about facing the evil that had been unleashed by those ancient rituals. The spirit of the ancient priest gave them instructions on how to perform an exorcism ritual to dispel the dark energy that held the church captive. Gathering courage, the friends followed instructions and began reciting ancient words of power. As they did so, the shadows in the crypt began to writhe and move away. The dark energy stirred, resisting their expulsion, but they remained determined. The crypt shook and creaked as the ritual continued. The spirit of the ancient priests remained by their side, supporting them in their fight against evil. The battle between light and dark reached its peak when the shadows finally dissipated, and the crypt fell silent. The church, which was once full of sinister presences, was now peaceful. The curse that had haunted her for so long had been broken, and her friends had triumphed over the supernatural. As they left the church, the dawn light began to illuminate the sky, and they felt a sense of deep relief. The mystery that had led them to enter that dark church had finally been solved, and they were free. The four friends knew they would share an experience that would bond them forever, a journey through the unknown that would leave them with a deeper understanding of the supernatural world. They left St. Michael's Church behind, now at peace, and headed toward the light of the new day, remembering that sometimes courage and determination are the only way to face the supernatural and escape the unknown.